Thank you very much, Jim. It's a pleasure for me to be here, to return once again to the American Veterans Center conference and have three gentlemen like this to tell their stories. As Jim said, for the last 10 years or so, I was involved with collecting stories. And I know the value of veterans telling their stories to inspire people like yourself, to serve as touchstones for the future, for people to research these stories, and for them personally and their families to have those to hold on to. We have three members of America's Greatest Generation with us this morning. Each of them comes with a different story. Each of them comes from a different perspective. And I'm going to let them each tell their story in their own way here for about 10 minutes or so, and then we'll allow you folks to ask them some questions. But let me first introduce them. First of all, the first gentleman here to my left is Mr. R.B. Burgin, United States Marine Corps, World War II, served in the Pacific with the 1st Marine Division, a mortarman who participated in many of the landings in the Pacific during World War II. He's going to talk about those. Sitting next to him is Mr. Robert Owens. Mr. Owens is also with the United States Marine Corps. He enlisted during World War II. He is one of the Montford Marines. If you don't know who the Montford Marines are, before you leave here today, you will know who they are, and what they went through, and how they served, and the importance that they have in the history of the Marine Corps, and particularly the history of African Americans who have served the Marine Corps. And finally, at the end, we have Mr. Manny Mandel, a survivor of the Holocaust. He's going to tell what I just heard his story this morning for the first time. A fascinating story, a piece of World War II that I don't think many of us know about. You know about the Holocaust, but maybe you don't know about what he went through and what his situation was. So without any further ado, I'd like to call on Mr. R.B. Burgin. Mr. Burgin, if you'd like to come to the podium, you can. Would you please give us an account of your service in the Marine Corps, why you joined, and what it's meant to you?
I lost the mic.
You do?
Oh, no, sorry.
Oh, yes.
I joined the Marine Corps in November the 13th, 1942, and went through boot camp in San Diego, and I did my advanced training at Camp Elliott. When I got back over from overseas, there was no more Camp Elliott. They had moved to Camp Pendleton. I joined the Marine Corps on November the 13th, and March the 12th, I was headed for overseas. I joined up with the 1st Marine Division. They had just come off of Guadalcanal, and I credit me being here today with the Guadalcanal veterans. I tried to learn all I could about what the Japs did and what we did. And I would sit around and listen to the veterans that had been on Guadalcanal, listening to their stories, and try to learn all I could about what they did. And my first battle was New Britain. I was in 3 battles, New Britain, Peleliu, and Okinawa. And it's much difference in daylight and dark with all 3 of them. New Britain was a jungle warfare, and we were there in the monsoon season, and it rained and it rained and it rained and it rained some more. My 2 little toenails rotted completely off. They stayed wet so long. And wake up, you would be exhausted and wake up in the morning and the water in your foxhole would be up to your chin. Then came Peleliu, and it was 100 to 120 degrees on the Coral Island every day that we were on there. You can imagine the gear that the Marines carry, what a burden that was. And we had over 6,000 casualties on that 2 by 6 mile island. And the Army came in, relieved us after 30 days, and they had over 2,000 casualties after that. So that made that little island, 2 by 6 mile island, with over 8,000 casualties. They had over 500 caves in the island, man-made caves. Then came Okinawa, and we had Okinawa April 1st, 1945, and it was over October the 26th. June of 26, 1945. We fought for 3 months, almost 3 months on that island before we had it secured. We was on New Britain, and snipers were in the trees and camouflaged, and there's a 5-gallon water can sitting by the side of the tree, and the canteen cup on top of it. I went down and got a drink. In a few minutes, Jim Burgin went down, and he reached for the canteen cup. A Jap shot the canteen cup off of the top of that water can. He took about 3 steps backwards and turned around and looked at me, and he said, "I don't think I'm that damn thirsty." Yeah. Peleliu was roughest battle I was in. As I said, it was 120 degrees every day they was on that island. And it was a coral island, and we couldn't bury the dead. And imagine the dead Jap within 3 feet of your foxhole, swelled up of 3 sizes, and maggots crawling in and out of it. There was the stuff we had to put up with is almost as bad as the Japs themselves. Then Okinawa, we had Okinawa April 1st, and we didn't have much resistance until May the 1st. Just an odd sniper. And May the 1st, we got stuck into it. And May the 20th, I got hit and spent 20 days in the field hospital and come back, picked up where I left off. Then we went to the north end of Okinawa after the battle was over, and we were right beside of the airport, and the ocean, there was about a 60-foot drop to the ocean, and the airplanes would take off and do their thing. And one afternoon, while we was on Okinawa after the battle was over, Corsair come in from the west and come down our company street upside down. And I think it could he was so low, I think he could stuck his hand out of the cockpit and touched the ground. And he come from the west and did the victory roll and come right back and did the same thing going the opposite direction. And that was the highlight of the day. I don't know, I may be a little prejudiced, but I think the Marine fighter pilots are the best, pilots. They can fight together, or they can fight individual. I know they saved our butts many times. They bombed and strafed Nicosia, a little island off of Peleliu, and the smoke and dust, and they would come in, dive down in that dust and smoke, and I think they was a crash, and about the time I think they crashed, they would pull up, and they did a good job. Okinawa was altogether different. We had civilians on Okinawa for the first battle we were in, and the saddest thing I seen was a mother and a little child, about 2 years old, and they were both wounded, and the child was just shaking, literally shaking. That's the saddest thing I've ever seen in World War II.
For sure. We had an agreement, right?
Yeah.
We had an agreement that I could cut him off at 10 minutes.
Yes.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Before we hear our next speaker, we have a brief introduction video that'll give you a little bit of idea of what the Montford Marines are all about.
The spirit of our Corps, embodied in the eagle, globe, and anchor, lives within the soul of every Marine. This spirit is born through arduous rite of passage at boot camp and officer training, after which a young man or woman is called a United States Marine for the first time. Our ethos has been shaped by ordinary men and women, patriots who showed extraordinary leadership and courage, both physical and moral.
From 1942 to 1949, approximately 20,000 African-American men enlisted in the Marine Corps at a time when our nation was at war and the country and military services were resistant to integration. They came from the North and from the South, from all walks of life. They came for different reasons. Some wanted the challenge of being a Marine, some wanted to earn a living, but all came to protect and serve their country honorably. They arrived on a rugged and heavily wooded 5.5-acre site near Jacksonville, North Carolina, called Montford Point. The first group of these pioneering Marines built the now famous camp of wooden huts. Others that followed fell in on their handiwork. They braved a variety of threats, everything from the swagger sticks of tough drill instructors to the snakes and the mosquitoes, and even those bears that inhabited the land. In many cases, they were challenged harder than their white counterparts, entering the Corps at the same time.
These brave Marines served with honor during a critical period in our nation's history, fighting in some of the bloodiest struggles in the Pacific, Saipan, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. Some died in these epic island battles. Many others continued their service in the colds of Korea and the jungles of Vietnam. Many Montford Point veterans, men like Gilbert Hashmark Johnson, Edgar Huff, and Frederick C. Branch, are now legends in the rich history of the Marine Corps.
In June of 1942, I saw a newspaper article to the effect that the Marine Corps had begun accepting Negroes for service with the Corps.
Well, you know, you can't think of being Marine without thinking about the Montford Pointers, because they are the beginning. You often question yourself, could I have done that? Could I have had the perseverance to come and to join an organization, first, that didn't want you, two, that had the history of being the last service to integration?
The Marine Corps, basically,
Now, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce to you one of the Montford Marines, Mr. Robert Owens. Speaking right here.
You want me to speak right here? I guess I can be heard. Good morning. Good morning. My name is Robert Owens. I am a former Montford Point Marine. I am 89 years old. I went in the Marine Corps in 1943. I was only 16 years old. I lied and put my age up. They didn't send for me, but anyway, I went in 1943. But let me, I don't want to get ahead of myself. So let me read a little article here, which you probably already heard. In 1941, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed Executive Order 8802, allowing African Americans to be recruited to the United States Marine Corps. African Americans receive basic training at Camp, Montford, but North Carolina. And from 1942 until 1949, African American recruits trained at segregated training base at Camp Montford Point. Of those Marines, over 13,000 served overseas. During World War II, most were assigned to ammunition at depot companies and charged with duties of carrying ammunition and supplying the frontliners, and returning with the wounded and the dead to transport ships. At the end of the war, all but 1,500 Montford Point Marines were discharged at the convenience of the government. So that brings me to, I enlisted in the Marine Corps in 1943. November of 1943. And I reported back to Montford Point Camp December the 5th of 1943. And before I even got out of my civilian clothes, I had an M1 rifle placed on the back of my wrists. I had to stand up like this. They put an M1 rifle on the back of my wrists. And the standard rifle then was the standard rifle weighed 9 pounds. Boy, but after you stand up for 5 or 10 minutes, boy, with 9 pounds, with your arms extended, it seemed like it weighs 9,900 pounds. And why did I have to do that? Because they was giving us orientation. I mean, coming into the Marine Corps, they was telling us, all about, our transition, but from civilian life, in the military life. And, they said that, from now on, but you would be known as, instead of Robert Owens, you'd be known as Private Robert Owens. So they talked, they went on and talked for about another half an hour. And then the DI came up to me, and he said, what's your name? And I said, my name is Robert Owens. Yeah. I've been saying that all my life, but for 16 years. I forgot that quick. Instead of putting Private Boy in the front. So they put that rifle over the back of my wrist. You understand what I'm saying? But that made me pay attention quick. That got my attention. See, because I was born in a little city off the ocean of southern New Jersey, but which is called Atlantic City, New Jersey. I was born there, in 1927. And my mother, she had 11 children. And I was the 6th eldest. And my father died when I was 9 years old. He died, in 1936. Well, anyway, just to make a long story short, I dropped out of school. I never finished high school. I dropped out of school around 1942, and in 1943, I was walking down the street in Philadelphia, and a friend of mine, Bobby Andrews and I, but we were walking down the street, and we seen this, induction station. But so we said, well, we dared each other. He said, Bob, both our names was Bob. He said, Bob, he said, I dare you to go in there and enlist. Because back then they had Uncle Sam, red, white, and blue, but I need you, but coming into the military. And so I told him, I said, if you do it, I said, I'll do it. Being young boys. But so we both went in the induction station and signed up. He signed up for the Navy. I signed up for the Marine Corps. And that's how I become to enlist in the Marine Corps. But going back, but just a little way back, I had my oldest brother, Luther. He was in the Army. He went in, in 1942. And my next oldest brother, Louis, he was in the Army. And both of them served overseas. Louis, he served in Patton's, tank corps. He hooked up over to Patton's tank corps, and they went into Germany. And my other brother, Luther, I don't remember what outfit he was in, but he served in 1945. So see, me being but a youngest son, but I knew that my brothers was serving. And then, if I go back but just a little further, in the 1936, when I was 8 years old, I had an uncle that had served in World War I. His name was Uncle Phil. I used to go to the store for him all the time. He used to give me pennies. Pennies was like $10 but a day. And in 1936, the government gave the World War I veterans, like a $500 bonus. Think about it. $500 back in 1936 was worth $50,000 for the day, almost. I'm telling you, that's how that. So I always had some connection with the military. I always knew about military. I heard about soldiers that fought in the Civil War and all that, but I didn't know that much about it. But from World War I used to listen to my Uncle Phil. He was gas in France. And I used to go to the store for him, but he used to slobber. The mustard gas, but left his face, he was twisted like this. His face was twisted, he used to slob from the mouth, and his eyes was crossed, and that come from a German mustard gas, see? So I knew, I knew something about the military, But anyway, getting back to Montford Point, I arrived in Montford Point, just like I said, December the 5th, and I took my boot training there, and it wasn't easy. See? The first Marines came, the first Montford Point Marines came in, in 42, but they were, their DIs was all leftover Marines from World War I. That was trying to make their 20 years, 25 years, but so they could retire. But so they were their DIs in. And the first Marines that I talked to came in 42. They said they caught actually hell. I mean hell. Because you know what they said? They didn't want them in there no way. They didn't want them in there. But so what they were trying to do was break them down and have them drop out, and that would be the end of it. But you know, I talked to a lot of those First Marines that come in, and they said no. They said no, but they said, you know, we endured it because we knew what they were trying to do anyway, you know. So if we had a fail in 1948, Truman probably wouldn't have never passed with the integration bill, integrated with the armed forces, see? Up until 1948, all the armed forces were segregated. But by us persevering, standing up, and I don't care what they put on us, we did it. Understand what I'm saying? We did anything that they asked us to do. And as a result of that, I can sit here today and tell you that I never sought recognition. Okay? Never sought recognition. But recognition found me. Okay? In 2011, Congress passed a law honoring the Montford veterans. In 2011, it was only 400 of us left from World War II. Out of 20,000 Marines that came through Montford Port, it was only 400 left in 2011. And then in 2012, they had a ceremony at one, I forget which building it is, I got it written down here. They had a sermon, let me look it up so I get it right. The Montford Port Marines Association stuff, they had a sermon at one of the naval buildings in downtown D.C., and President Obama, he presented the gold medal, to the 400 Marines that was left. See? But I didn't attend, but because I was in the process of moving and I missed out on it,
Mr. Owens, we're going to have to stop right there because we've got one more speaker.
Okay.
Okay.
One more?
Okay.
Well, I just want to say, look, I give my thanks to the Congress. I give my thanks to the Marine Corps, because actually all that I went through, listen, I wouldn't trade it for nothing but in the world, because it really helped me. It helped me to grow up. It helped me to be who I am today. I raised 9 children, and I took a lot of my military training, like discipline and organization, and I incorporated that in my family. And I got my youngest daughter, but went to the University of Chicago. All my children graduated, but from high school. Some of them went to college. But now all my grandchildren is going to college. So I thank each and every one of them.
Thank you, Mr. Owens. Thank you, Mr. Owens. Our final speaker is Mr. Manny Mandel, who was a young child, found himself in Hungary in World War II. And I'll stop there and let him tell what his story is.
From the previous speakers and from what I know who was in the audience, we have many things in common. I was raised in Philadelphia where he enlisted. I used to go to the beach in Atlantic City where he was born. I was an ROTC for 2 years, which some of you folks aren't connected with. But my reason for being here has nothing to do with reminiscence. My reason for being here kind of has to do with this little badge that I wear. Those of you who will come closer later or whatever can see, it's the Hebrew word zachor, remember. Because it is unfortunate that our knowledge of and remembrance of that which I'm going to talk about is very limited, and I wish it were more. The purpose of my being here is to talk with you about a particular vignette, a particular little piece of the Second World War, specifically the Holocaust, in which I was an unfortunate participant as a child. I'm the youngest of the three people here, I think, because I'm just 80, which is like a kid. No, you're the kids. In any case, I was raised in Hungary. Some of you know where that is. Some of you may have been there. Hungary had a distinction in the Second World War of being one of the two countries in Europe which were allies of the Nazis, Italy and Hungary. As a consequence, the Holocaust did not come to Hungary actively until very late in the war. What's very late? The war ends in May of 1945, and Colonel Adolf Eichmann, the manager of the deportations from all the countries and the clearing of all of Europe of Jews, doesn't come to Hungary until March of 1944. Now, March 19th, 1944 is only 14 months before the end of the war. You can imagine that the situation is different there than it would have been in 42 or 41 in other places. What I'm going to tell you about was not 1944, but 1941. We're living in Hungary. My parents are both ethnic Hungarians. My mother is from southern Hungary, which some of you may know better as the former Yugoslavia. My father is from eastern Hungary, which many of you may know as the home base and the home port of one Count Dracula. He's from Transylvania. I was not born in Budapest, but that doesn't matter. I came there as a baby, as a very small baby. I mentioned a man a moment ago that came to Budapest 1944, March 19th, out of Eichmann. But the story I'm going to tell you has nothing to do with Eichmann. It precedes him. The Nazi regime took over much of Europe, piecemeal from 1939 on. In the winter of 1941, my mother and my father decided to take a little trip south from Budapest to Yugoslavia, my mother's hometown, to visit with my grandparents, my mother's parents, and her two sisters and cousin. And we went down there by train. The war in 1941 was not sufficiently inundating in our part of Europe that we could travel by train freely, and we went to stay with one of my aunts. We're there a couple of days. I'm 5.5 years old, and I don't recall exactly what we did the first or second day. On the third day in the morning, somebody comes to the door and says, there's something happening downstairs on the street, we don't know what. A few minutes later, maybe 5 minutes later, and I mean 5 minutes, two policemen come to the door, knock, knock. Ladies and gentlemen, you need to dress warmly. You need to come outside. We have to conduct a census. Now, they were reasonably polite. We had no idea why. We got dressed warmly. This is winter time. There's snow on the ground, but it's not bitter. We had all various kinds of clothing and coats and muffs and boots, and we go outside. We have no idea why a census, except you need to know that the Nazi government, which occupied the country, conducted censuses, if that's the plural for census, about every 15 minutes. Not quite. We do it every 10 years. They thought if they knew where everybody was at all times, they could control the population, which is not necessarily wrong. It's true. We go outside to the street. We're told to turn left and to walk in that direction. We walked for some time, several hours. My mother carried me, my father carried me, I walked. I'm 5.5 years old, I'm a little guy. Until we arrived at a place which I recognized. On our right was the main street, there was a sidewalk, and on our left was an 8-foot stockade fence. Why did I recognize it? Those of you who have been to Europe or know about it know that in countries which are not on the sea or on the lake, They will make beaches out of rivers. In this particular case, the Danube River flows through the city, all the way south, going from Germany down to the Black Sea. And I remember from the previous summer, just 2 or 3 months before, that I remember being inside this stockade fence where there were hot pools and cold pools and whirlpools and restaurants and amusement park, a lovely, lovely beach kind of a resort place that you went to for the day and then you went home. My parents knew it, of course, because my mother was raised in that city. Still nobody knows why we're here. We are walking along this stockade fence, 3 or 4 abreast, very slowly walking in that direction. We notice that the big gates, the stockade gates of this place are open, and we know that that's where the entrance was. You paid your fees, that's where the trucks went in, and it was the entrance to the beach, which was probably 200, 300, or maybe 400 yards to our left on the frozen Danube River. In the wintertime, doesn't make any sense. We're walking along, kind of ambling along, people go down to that gate, they turn left and they walk into the gate. Some distance before we get to the gate, rather interestingly, a policeman is standing over on the right side and says to my father, "Mister, what are you doing here?" My father says, "I'm here visiting with my family." He says, "Oh, that's fine, that's your business, that's not mine. But what are you doing here in this particular group? You're not from this community. If we count you and your little group in a census, it'll mess up the numbers. That can't happen." Good, step aside. So we, at this point, my grandparents, my aunts, so forth, step aside and go to the right and we wait. Almost as if by coincidence, this is probably 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, a staff car comes down the road, a uniformed officer comes out, has a powwow with the rest of his buddies, gets on a bullhorn and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, the requirements of the census have been met. Please go home." Again, we have no idea of any sort as to what in heaven's name took place. He even says, "There's a school over there, you're welcome to go over there and get some hot coffee or chocolate and go home," which of course we did. If you're wondering what happened, I will tell you. Somebody eventually told me many years later, because I couldn't understand it, 5 and a half. Let me tell you the punchline. The punchline is that everybody who made that left turn into the beach walked down to the water, which had been opened by cannon fire that morning, 3 feet of ice. They were shot in the back into the river and were found the next spring when the river thawed, if they were found at all. But what was this? Ladies and gentlemen, I've described to you a pogrom. P-O-G-R-O-M, a senseless, purposeless, meaningless, useless exercise in saying, "I can do this to you, and there's nothing you can do about it." Something happened in one of the villages nearby, an act of guerrilla partisan activity that you ought to study in school, what the partisans were, and as retribution for that, in 1941, they did this pogrom. 350 people were killed. I don't know how many were injured. In my immediate family, nobody was. We went back home, and I can tell you, in order to stay with the deadline, the timing of the colonel, that we went home to Budapest the next morning. Now, interestingly, while this pogrom had no meaning to me as a 5.5-year-old, the next day's adventure did. My father called for a taxi to go to the train station, and what arrived was a 1-horsepower taxi. You ever hear of one? It's called a sleigh with a horse. Gentlemen, in any case, that was a great exciting thing for a kid 5.5 years old. They ran regular cars, but they also ran sleighs in the wintertime, and this is a 1-horse sleigh. Took us to the train station, we got on the train, and we went home. Let me stop there to give time for questions. I just wanted to give you a little bit of a vignette, a little bit of a story about what happened to this kid when he was 5.5 years old, and what he can tell you to in some way urge you to see to it that not because you need to be involved, but you need to understand. There's a fellow who wrote 120 years ago. Anybody remember the fellow by the name of George Santayana? But he said, those of us who do not learn our history well may be doomed to repeat it or repeat parts of it. I leave you with that thought.
I need a signal as to whether we have time for questions, or 5 minutes. Real quickly, does anyone have a question for one of these three gentlemen? Raise your hand. One in the back.
Please do not begin to speak until you have the microphone in your hand.
Way up there.
Oh, I think, were you first?
That's the first hand I saw.
Oh.
I'm not surrendering, but I can't see.
Yeah, I know that light is, that one particular light.
That one's it for me.
Good morning. This question's for Mr. Mandel. A couple years ago, I took a trip to Europe, to Germany, and I've visited one of the concentration camps, and it says that you were diverted to Bergen-Belsen. Just like a short, what was part of your experience at Bergen-Belsen, if I may ask?
Sure. You went to Bergen-Belsen to visit?
I went to.
Use the mic, please.
You went to Buchenwald. Bergen-Belsen was one of the labor camps not far from Hanover. I told you that the war came to Hungary very, very late, in March of 1944. As soon as this happened, because the German High Command, all the way up to Hitler, whom you may remember was number 3 in the German Nazi government. Hitler, who was number 2? Goering. And Himmler was number 3. All the way up to Himmler, they were making any kind of deals they could for any kind of bartering, any kind of anything that would permit those people in the leadership to in fact wind up, if they survived the war, not in Germany. Adolf Eichmann, who was the leader of the deportations, he was appointed to this conference in Berlin in 1942, cleared out all of Europe, and the last country he comes to is Hungary. And the Hungarian Jewish community was not deported until March of 1944, at which point they began at 12,000 a day. That's a large number of people. As soon as he arrived, 2 members of a so-called rescue community approached Eichmann. How they even got to him, I don't know. But they did. And there was a proposal made, I'll tell you this very quickly, there was a proposal made that said, if Eichmann is willing to release 1 million Jews from concentration camps, they will provide him 10,000 trucks with certain materiel for the war. Several problems. Eichmann, if he wanted to, couldn't release 1 million people. There were no 1 million people in camp anymore, not that late in the war. They'd been killed or in some way distributed. And these guys, 10,000 trucks, they didn't have a hubcap, let alone 10,000 trucks. One of the 2 men was dispatched to go to Egypt to negotiate with the British about getting trucks. He was arrested as a spy, spent the rest of his time in jail, survived the war. As part of this negotiation from 10,000 trucks and 1 million people, it became about 1,678 people for several suitcases laden with valuables. Remember, money was useless, except for American dollars and British pounds, which nobody had. But diamonds and rubies and jewelry and stuff was useful. That's always tradable. And for that kind of return, these 1,600 and some people were taken supposedly to a neutral port. But instead of a neutral port, were taken to Bergen-Belsen as additional hostages. I was one of them, spending 6 months from July of 44 to December of 44 in Bergen-Belsen, and then taken out by the Germans to Switzerland in order to complete the deal. They couldn't kill us, because if they killed us, the bargain wouldn't happen. You don't kill the hostage. Let me stop there. I hope it answers something about Bergen-Belsen.
You know, too often these sessions don't provide us with enough time to get the whole story. But what you need to understand is you see 3 treasures sitting in front of you. The storytellers from World War II. I encourage you to seek these gentlemen out, if you see them today. Ask them the questions that may still be on your mind, but also go and do a little bit more of your own research into what they've been talking about and what they experienced. Gentlemen, thank you for being here this morning. Thank you for being here this morning as well, ladies and gentlemen.